have started?
I've started.
You have started, right? Hi everyone, my name is Ori David, and today we shall be interrogating a very important case. It's an old English case on the law of contracts. Yeah, we are going to be interrogating the case of Carlill versus Carbolic Smokeball Company. Carlill and Carbolic Smokeball Company's case has been adjudged to be the first case that every law student of contract gets to come across first. And so we'll be doing this by first of all examining the summary of facts. Then we'll proceed to look at the issue before the court, and we shall then proceed to look at the defendant's arguments. Whereupon we shall then proceed to look at the plaintiff's arguments and the decision of the court and the relevant ratios that are deductible from the case of Carlill and Carbolic Smokeball. Also, I shall also be bringing to your notice 10 things you probably did not know about the case of Carlill and Carbolic Smokeball. So I will need you to watch this video to the end so that you don't miss out. And more importantly, do not forget to subscribe. Click on the subscribe button. And if you feel like there is any point that has not been made, or if you feel like there is anywhere that I've left you in a quandary or confusion, you can also bring it to my notice by commenting down below. Do not forget, my name is Ori David, and you are welcome to the Ori David Consult channel. And without further ado, we shall begin the online class. The case of Carlill versus Carbolic Smokeball Company. First, summary of facts. The facts are very simple. The Carbolic Smokeball issued an ad. The ad contained the condition that anyone who used the Carbolic, the smoke ball was a flu remedy, and the company said that anyone who used the smoke ball and yet contracted the flu would be paid £100. Mrs. Louisa Elizabeth Carlill bought the smoke ball, used the smoke ball accordingly, that is 3 times a day for 2 weeks, and yet caught the flu. As expected, she requested that the promised £100 be paid to her. That's the company rebuffed her request several times and ends the action before this court. Now we shall proceed to look at the issue before the court. The lone issue, or the main issue before the court, was whether there was a binding contract between Mrs. Carlill and the Carbolic Smokeball Company. In order to settle this issue and dispense with it, the court entertained arguments from both parties. And with this, we shall then proceed to look at the arguments of the defendant being the Carbolic Smokeball Company. The defendant's argument was that there was no binding contract between the company and Mrs. Carlill, and they advanced arguments to enunciate this. The first argument was that the ad was too vague to make a contract, as there was no limit as to time and no means of checking the use of the ball by the consumers. The person might claim that he contracted the flu 10 years after using the remedy. In essence, they argued that the terms of the ad were vague into where matters, vague as to the person they are making the offer to, and vague as to time. What the company was saying, in essence, was that you cannot conclude that the ad was a proper offer because of the vagueness. Remember that it is a trite principle of law that is of wider and general acceptance, that an offer or the terms of your offer cannot be vague. This particular triteness of law was also echoed by the Nigerian court in the case of Orient Bank and Belante, where the court held that you must make sure that the terms of your offer do not leave the offeree in doubt or conjectures. Therefore, the company was arguing that the ad was too vague as to constitute a proper offer. And their argument was that, as the first argument was that first the ad, which was meant to be the offer, did not state the time, no limit as to time. So they said, okay, fine. We said if you should use the smoke ball and if you should contract the influenza, but that they didn't state the limit to time. When exactly could it be said that you have used what the smoke ball and you have contracted the influenza, thereby making you eligible to the promised £100? They argued that it could not be reasonably supposed that the company intended to pay anyone and everyone who used the smoke ball and then contract the influenza anytime. Does it mean that if you should use it for the 2 weeks and let's say 5 months later you contract the influenza, does it mean that you are also entitled and eligible to the £100? And also they argued and that is as to time, and also argued that the offer was also vague as to the person. The argument was that which person exactly were they making the offer to? Because a person could also come and say that yes, we used the smoke ball 10 years ago, and now today we have contracted the influenza, and thus we are entitled to the promised £100. And secondly, another ground for maintaining or contending that there was no binding contract was also that the company argued that there was lack of communication of acceptance. Similarly, it is an ageless principle of the law of contract that it is not enough for the offeree to accept an offer. You must go further to communicate the acceptance of the offer. And to this, you can see the case of Feldhaus versus Bindley. And the company was arguing, and let's say that they had constituted an offer. Mrs. Carlill probably accepted the offer, but that there was no communication of acceptance, and that seeing as there was no communication of acceptance, there was no binding contract between the company and Mrs. Carlill. Another ground also was that they argued that the promise was a mere puff and that there was no intention to create legal relationship with Mrs. Carlill. Yeah, basically they argued for us that yes, it was just a company's policy, that it was not meant to create any legal obligation or to create any legal relationship with anyone. That it was just a policy. When that argument could not fly, they then said, well, it was a bet. And the whole and was a bet, not anything that could create any form of legal obligations on them. And then also they proceeded to argue that the contract was made to the whole world. Because they said, well, should you even say that it is a contract? This contract was made to the whole world. It was an ad that was issued to the general public. And that there is no way you can make a contract with the whole world. The principle of privity of contract says you must have parties to the contract. So they were contending that there was no way the company could have made a contract to the whole world. And as such, they concluded before the court and submitted that in general, looking at the totality of their arguments and their grounds for these arguments, that there was no binding contract between Mrs. Carlill and the Carbolic smoke ball company. After this, then, it was time for the plaintiff, that is Mrs. Carlill, to also advance arguments before the court. And this we shall be doing in no time. Yes, stop it.